Hello students, welcome to Module 5.2.2, Six Kingdoms. The previous module, 5.2.1, you should have learned the taxonomic hierarchy from domain through species, these different categories, and you should also have mastered the concept of scientific names, binomial nomenclature, two-name naming. In this particular module, we're going to study six kingdoms. All life can be classified into six different kingdoms, and you can see on the screen in front of you the three domains of life and the six kingdoms of life. And so that is what we think that you should be learning in this particular module. So know the names and the distinguishing features of these kingdoms. There's a table 3 slides ahead. Before we get to that, however, this slide just displays the complete taxonomy of several different organisms. It does not include the domain names, but for that there would only be domain bacteria and domain eukarya for the 4 on the right, a juniper tree, a flower, a fly, and a human. And you should not memorize all these names. You should memorize the categories on the very left plus the domain. Let's just look at the human classification. Kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Primates. Notice it always has an S on it. And when we're talking about the order. Hominidae is a family of humans. Homo is the genus. Homo sapiens. Notice that they've put sapiens with the H there standing for homo because the species doesn't stand alone. And down here is a common name. Sometimes students say, well, why do we have to use all these Latin names? Why can't we just use a common name? Well, think of the common name sage. Sage designates a shrub in the desert, but there are, in fact, somewhere around 30 different species that are called sage. And so to distinguish them, it's important that we use scientific names. Just an example. Here's a tree of life, and in the tree of life, I'll highlight here the 6 kingdoms. That's really what we want you to kind of emphasize here. But let's just create it. Down here at the base of the tree of life is where the first cell would have occurred. This occurs according to science. The first cell evolved from self-replicating chemical systems that gave rise to protocells, or protobionts as they're also called. Once there is a cell, it is very easy for the evolution to give rise to the diversity of species that we have on the planet today. Some 1.8 million described species, and many more than that probably exist. If we look down here from the first cell giving rise, and it was a prokaryote, gave rise to the domain bacteria and the domain archaea. These are both prokaryotes. And then somewhere right in here, the first eukaryotic cell evolved. That is, it had a nucleus and developed organelles. And then we had what is called the crown of eukaryotes. And this was a time of great evolutionary experimentation. There were at least 30 different lineages of what we would call protistans that occurred here. And of those many lineages, 3 of them gave rise to multicellular groups, the plants, the fungi, and the animals. And these probably compose the organisms rather, that you know best, that you encounter in your daily life. And so it's kind of interesting. This is kind of the one scheme of the tree of life, and this is a useful diagram. So you should kind of think about where these 6 kingdoms are and how they relate to one another. Here is a table that gives us some of the attributes of those 6 kingdoms of life. Let's go through this. We'll start here in the upper left with Archaebacteria, the kingdom Archaebacteria. This is in domain Archaea. And these are composed of prokaryotic cells that lack peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan is a complex carbohydrate polymer. I could have told you about this at the very beginning of the semester. In fact, what peptidoglycan has is strands of carbohydrates that are cross-linked with peptide bonds, or like bonds that link amino acids that make proteins together. And so it's like carbohydrates and proteins kind of combined. And of course, the archaea, or the archaeobacteria, lack peptidoglycan. The archaea do have absorptive nutrition, and then they are considered heterotrophic, and they have photosynthetic nutrition, and those are considered autotrophic. All of the archaea are single-celled or unicellular. They can aggregate together as colonies. The cells in colonies are independent with regard to nutrition and reproduction, and this is what distinguishes a single-celled colonial organism from a multicellular organism. In a multicellular organism such as yourself, all your cells cooperate for nutrition and for reproduction. Representatives of archaea include methanogens. These are methane-producing bacteria. They sometimes called swamp gas. Sometimes this swamp gas can spontaneously combust. Also, among the archaea are included halophiles, salt-loving bacteria, and thermophiles, heat-loving bacteria. Let's look at then kingdom bacteria, and these include cells that are prokaryotic that do have peptidoglycan in their cell walls. So this is one of the major distinctions between the archaea and the bacteria. Same types of nutrition. Absorptive forms are heterotrophic. Photosynthetic forms are autotrophic. These two are all unicellular, and they can aggregate in colonies. These can include some very serious bacterial pathogens. Think of things like anthrax or cholera, bubonic plague, but they can also, the vast majority of bacteria are not pathogens, and they can include very beneficial forms such as cyanobacteria. This is a blue-green algae which serves as a producer in some ecosystems. Next, we're going to consider the four kingdoms which are in domain Eukarya. We're going to come back to Protista. We're going to start with Plantae. Kingdom Plantae is made out of organisms composed of eukaryotic cells, cells that have nuclei. These cells have cell walls made of cellulose. You already knew this. Plants are typically photosynthetic, using photosynthesis in the green pigment chlorophyll to produce their own food. These organisms are multicellular, and they have true tissues. And representatives include all sorts of different plants. I think I'll mention two. A poppy, a small herbaceous plant that produces beautiful flowers, or an oak tree, a large woody species that can be quite majestic. Of course, let's consider a second kingdom in domain Eukarya. This would be kingdom Fungi. These are organisms that are eukaryotic. They have nuclei in their cells, and their cells are covered with cell walls made of chitin. Their nutrition is absorptive, so these are absorptive heterotrophs. Their body plan, although they are multicellular, they have kind of a distinctive body plan, and we call it filamentous because they have these little thread-like filaments that make up their body. And later when we study fungi, we will give you some terminology to describe their body. Representatives will include things like the grocery store mushroom, or the mushroom that killed Claudius Caesar, Amanita phalloides. A third kingdom in domain Eukarya is kingdom Animalia. This is a kingdom to which humans belong. These are eukaryotic organisms. They have nuclei in their cells, but there are no cell walls on the cells of animals. The nutrition of animals is ingestive. They eat parts or entire other organisms. This is how you eat. And the organization is that these are multicellular organisms with tissues. And you can think of all sorts of different animals. I'll think of my dog Jake here. The fourth group of organisms that are included in domain Eukarya include what we will call here kingdom Protista. Now we know kingdom Protista is actually an artificial designation, and the criterion for being listed as a member of kingdom Protista is that an organism is eukaryotic and is not a plant, a fungus, or an animal. So that's really not a very good criterion to be included in a kingdom. And so it's kind of like the catch-all or the garbage can kingdom. And in fact, as I said earlier, there may be as many as 30 different lineages that could be considered kingdoms, but that's too complex. And so we're going to use the historical, traditional designation of kingdom protista here. The cells in kingdom protista are eukaryotic. They do not, well, they may or may not have cell walls, so I haven't said here because this is a very broad category. Then they have every type of nutrition in this varied group. They can be absorptive heterotrophs, ingestive heterotrophs, or they can be photosynthetic autotrophs. They can be unicellular, they can be colonial, they can be multicellular. I don't believe multicellular is written on your table. You should write that yourself, that they may be multicellular. Think of the large seaweeds and things like that. Those are considered members of kingdom protista. And representatives can include different protozoans. Think of amoeba, which is both a genus and a common name, and paramecium. These are some of the organisms which fall here. So you should know this table and be able to reproduce the most critical parts of it. The rest of the slides in this module simply list the different kingdoms of life, and I'm going to flip through them, and if you want to stop and study one of these slides, simply pause your computer. So in domain bacteria, we have kingdom bacteria. These are the true bacteria. We have in domain archaea, kingdom archaebacteria, and these two are a form of prokaryotes. In domain eukarya, kingdom protista, we are showing here one of the multicellular seaweeds. You may have seen these when you're walking on the beach. Also in domain eukarya, we have kingdom plantae. I'm sorry, these are not plants. We have kingdom fungi, and we're showing here some fruiting bodies or some mushrooms. These produce spores and allow the fungi to reproduce. In domain eukarya, we do also have kingdom plantae, and this is a plant. It has green foliage, green leaves and stems, and then flowers for reproduction. And finally, in domain eukarya, we have kingdom animalia. This is a mountain sheep, I believe a doll sheep. And so with that, we will conclude this module.